A brave last stand always begins in the quiet moments before the storm. It begins in the cold wind that whips across a barren hill. It begins in a foreign land so very far from home. It begins with a choice. Ordinary men decide to stand and fight when every instinct tells them to run. This is the story of such a stand. The Filipino soldiers who answered a call to duty during the Korean War. A story of profound courage, simple in its telling, immense in its truth. A chapter often passed over, a whisper in the grand narrative of global conflict, but one that deserves to be heard. In 1950, a fire erupted on the Korean peninsula, a war that threatened to consume a nation and redraw the map of the world. The international community watched. Many nations chose to act, among them the Philippines, a young republic healing from its own scars. It sent volunteer soldiers, the Philippine Expeditionary Forces, to Korea, PEFTOK. Not men bred for frozen battlefields, men from sleepy towns, men from lush green farms, young men with families who loved them, who left the warmth of their tropical homes to serve something greater, in a land they'd only seen on maps. Their journey wasn't born of conquest, it was born of a simple, powerful ideal: to help. They went to aid a nation they did not know.
More than 7,000 served over the war and crossed the vast, indifferent ocean. They sailed toward a horizon promising a biting cold. Strange, formidable hills, frozen rivers, a conflict whose brutality they could not yet comprehend. Their arrival was a shock, a collision of worlds. The very air they breathed was different, thin, sharp, unforgivingly cold. The ground beneath their boots was hard and frozen, a stark contrast to the soft earth of their homeland. The people they came to defend looked different, spoke a language they could not understand. In that alien landscape, they had to learn and adapt fast. They learned to march through deep snow, to read the contours of unfamiliar maps. They trained relentlessly. Bonds forged in shared hardship grew as tight as family. In the crucible of that Korean winter, they learned to trust each other with their very lives. They smiled for a camera aboard a ship bound for Korea. To understand their bravery, you must first understand who these men were. They were not a faceless army. They were individuals, a story, a family, a home. Many were veterans of the Second World War, men who had already fought for their own country's freedom against an occupying force. They knew the bitter taste of invasion and the deep, abiding ache for sovereignty. They came from every corner of the archipelago, northern mountains of Luzon, southern islands of Mindanao, farmers, fishermen, teachers, clerks, mechanics, sons, brothers, fathers. When the call for volunteers went out, they stepped forward. The journey to Korea was more than just a physical passage across thousands of miles of ocean. It was a journey into the unknown, their forms growing smaller and smaller until they were swallowed by the distance. On board, the men passed the time cleaning their equipment, playing cards, and talking about what lay ahead. They sang songs of home to ward off the growing sense of apprehension, their voices carrying over the endless blue of the Pacific. Upon their arrival at the port of Busan in South Korea, they were met with a scene of devastation and a climate that was utterly alien. The first snowflakes began to fall, magical at first, but the novelty quickly wore off as the temperatures plummeted. They were issued heavy winter gear, clothing that felt bulky and strange, a land cloaked in white, beautiful but harsh, with bombed-out buildings, streams of refugees, and the distant rumble of artillery. The initial days and weeks were for intense acclimatization and training, learning warfare dictated by terrain and cold, preventing weapons from freezing and figuring out how to survive sub-zero temperatures. They trained alongside American, British, and other Allied soldiers. Despite language barriers, respect grew quickly. Initially uncertain, Allied commanders were soon impressed by their discipline, morale, and aptitude. The first real test came in patrols and reconnaissance, pushing deep, gathering intelligence, fighting fierce skirmishes. They earned a reputation for tenacity and fearlessness. Their skills as jungle fighters proved surprisingly adaptable to Korea's wilderness. No longer just boys from the tropics, they were formidable warriors. They trained in the snow, learning to operate their weapons in the harsh Korean winter. Of all the battles, one stands out: the battle for Hill Erie, a strategic linchpin near Cheowan, honeycombed with bunkers, trenches, and machine gun nests. The 20th Battalion combat team was tasked to hold, to draw a red line the enemy would not cross.
Under cover of darkness, they advanced through a landscape scarred by endless shelling. Not blind charges, practiced, precise, calculated. A brutal, claustrophobic fight. Grenades and bayonets in the labyrinth of trenches. Lieutenant Fidel V. Ramos led his platoon in a daring charge. They seized the crest and braced for the storm to come. The enemy launched ferocious counterattacks to reclaim the hill. For 2 days, the Filipinos held their ground against overwhelming numbers. Wave after wave repelled, ammunition running low, bodies pushed to the limit. When a machine gunner fell, another instantly took his place. When a section wavered, others rushed to reinforce it. They held the line. Their defense was a testament to an unbreakable spirit, a legendary feat of arms that earned the respect of the entire UN command. It was a brutal, unforgettable moment in their history. These moments, the grand and the small, defined them. Bakit? The brave last stand was sustained by everyday choices to protect each other, one brother at a time. History often focuses on the grand battles and the famous commanders, but the true character of an army is revealed in the small, uncelebrated acts of individual soldiers. Courage not just in epic charges, but in countless quiet moments of bravery. Medics who ran into enemy fire with only a kit and their courage to drag the wounded to safety. One shielded a fallen soldier with his own body, stopping the bleeding as shells fell around them. A radio operator, buried up to his waist, calmly relayed coordinates that saved his company. A lost canteen for a friend. A private sharing rations with a Korean child. A veteran teaching a recruit to breathe, to listen, to survive. Quiet defiance against war's dehumanization, humanity unextinguished. Well, these were the things that made them who they were. No one gets left behind. Victory in war is never clean. It is paid in pain and loss. The brave stand came at a heavy price, measured in lives cut short. In total, 112 Filipino soldiers were killed in action, over 300 wounded, some captured and held as prisoners of war. Each fallen soldier was a son, a husband, a father, a brother. Families shattered. A nation mourned with them. Survivors carried invisible wounds and memories of friends lost. They bore medals and scars on their souls. Among the most decorated Allied units, honored by many nations. In South Korea, their memory is held in high esteem, remembered as brothers. The story lives on, carved in stone, etched into two nations' memory. We must ensure the memory never fades. For decades, they gathered, their voices softer now, to talk about their friends. They remembered the cold, the taste of rations, the songs that kept spirits up, keeping the flame of memory alive, ensuring the fallen aren't forgotten. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act in spite of it. Even small acts, a medic running, an operator staying, a leader inspiring, can have a profound impact. Ordinary people bound by duty can achieve extraordinary things, a lesson in being a good neighbor to the world. And so, we must remember, we must speak their names, we must tell their story, we must keep their memory warm like a small, unwavering light against the darkness.